Hey, you came back. So I just want to first start off by saying thank you so much for all the love and support you guys have been showing us on the YouTube, on the podcast, the blog, the website, the newsletter, everything in between. Just really appreciate the love, and we continue to push out great content for you guys. So all I ask, make sure to like, comment, subscribe if you're watching a YouTube video version of this, or if you're listening to the podcast, leave a review, and I promise to give you a shout out. So for the Zero to Hero backend developer roadmap, the reason I want to do this episode, I was having a good conversation with my buddy Gerald. Shout out Gerald. Smart guy, done a lot of cool different things, but he was asking me, he was like, hey Caleb, I'm interested in coding. Should I do a boot camp? Are boot camps worth it? And I get asked this question quite often. And let's give you context. I am not a boot camp developer, but I'm not a traditional, I didn't go to school for computer science. I went to school for computer information systems, which to me is not a super technical degree, but didn't really learn coding till after the fact. And I learned it all through a lot of different free resources. Some were paid, some were free. But what I just want to clarify in this episode, you do not need to spend $10,000 on a boot camp to become a backend developer in 2021, 2022, and any year moving forward. But you might be asking, Caleb, where do I start? Well, step number one, you need to understand how the web works. Before starting your journey into becoming a software developer, I strongly encourage you to understand the main mechanics of the web, how data exchange works. Talking about things like HTTP, HTTPS, TCP, IP, the client server model, DNS, what is it? Browsers. You know you use Chrome, you know there's Safari, but outside of Apple and Google owning them, what's the difference? What's the commonality? What are cookies? Everybody's talking about clear your cookies. Do you accept cookies? What are cookies? Those are just a few concepts you need to master to kickstart your career, but I promise you that is probably the best place to start. And what I'm going to do for you guys, because you know your boy got you, I'm going to link a very popular resource. A lot of people go to this one. It's actually from 2015. Free Code Camp had this amazing breakdown of learning how the web works. And if that's not enough for you, I actually would just go on YouTube and Google how the internet works, how the web works. You are going to get so many different breakdowns and results for that keyword search, because it's something a lot of people overlook, but it's something, if you want to truly understand how to be a strong software developer, it's one of the first things I think you should master. Which leads into step number two. And I personally, I did not do this one, and I regret it, because if you don't do step number two, this is what can happen to you. You can go into a meeting, somebody can say something, it goes completely over your head, and you might be put on the spot where you're exposed. It's very easy to see people know that you don't know. So step number two, learn the fundamentals of computer science. And let me clarify, not the fundamentals of Java or Python or JavaScript, but computer science. How computers work, how variables are stored, the difference between compiled code and scripts, what's a compile versus a runtime error, the overall principles of programming. It is key to properly understand the underlying mechanics of complex backend frameworks, how to optimize your code towards the desired outcome. Those are all things you're going to need to know to be a good software developer. And of course, I got you. Check it out. Harvard itself has a free computer science fundamental course. I actually went through this one twice earlier in my career, and it was just so funny because I'm like, holy crap. I've been in meetings where people have been saying some things and it just went over my head. And I don't want you to go through that thing like I did. To learn the computer science fundamentals. And I will link the Harvard course in the show notes below. Which goes into step number three. For the backend Zero to Hero track, you need to learn some HTML and CSS. I know you picked Java, you picked Python because you didn't want to do front-end development, you didn't want to do UX or UI, and you didn't want to interact with the front end. That is fine. you still need to understand HTML and CSS. You don't have to master it, but you just need to understand some core concepts of it. Because the one thing I always advise all new beginners is create a portfolio site. It's a very common answer you get, but here's why you need to do it. A resume is a long piece of paper I do not want to read. I struggle reading articles that I picked on Medium, like, hey, let me read this article, and I still struggle reading the whole article. So why would I read a resume? In today's landscape, having a portfolio site is a great first project because it does two things. We are solving the problem where we need to practice. We are also solving a problem showing people that we're practicing. So creating a portfolio while you're taking the software development journey, it's just a great branding opportunity, marketing opportunity, like whatever you want to call it. But there's so many tutorials. Like I think one of my favorite ones recently is Code with Ania Kobo, where she actually did in an hour, I think hour and 15 course. She shows you how to build a personal portfolio. It's great because, like I said, you're going to learn, you're going to have to learn it because HTML and CSS are everywhere. So it's just better to get familiar with it now. Assuming you're following the map, on step 4, at this point, you need to learn version control. And we're talking specifically about Git, not GET, but GIT. Git is an open source version control system. And really what it allows you to do at a high level, keep track of your changes, back up your code, avoid disastrous consequences. And I'm serious. You can avoid disastrous consequences if you know Git. You can also cause horrible, disastrous consequences if you don't know Git. I feel like that should be a shirt. If you don't know Git. And then really the main purpose of Git is the tool that allows software developers to collaborate in a seamless fashion. My favorite place to go learn Git, there's actually a great tutorial. I'm going to link it, of course, but Atlassian has a phenomenal, not only do they talk about what is Git, but they tell you about the different Git strategies because every organization does it slightly different. And you might want to know, like, going into a new dev shop, oh, they do Git flow, or they merge into main, or they do feature branching. You want to know the difference, and you want to be able to just come on board and just pick up just like any other developer on the team. Step number 5, you need to learn the fundamentals of web security. Unfortunately, the world is full of bad people ready to steal and use your data. And if it's not your data, they might be using your customers' data, even worse, right? So knowing how to properly store, secure data, communications, that is essential for a backend developer. Understanding these fundamentals, things like CORS, HTTPS, basic hashing, authentication. I mean, those are just a few different concepts when you're working with APIs in the backend world, but check out this course I've linked below. They learn the fundamentals of cybersecurity for free, because you know I'm all about giving you guys free content and free resources. And I really think it would be something that can kind of help open your eyes a little bit, because what's going to happen is you're going to be on teams, you're going to be on projects where security might be brought up. And if you follow the first 4 steps, by the time you get to security, you should understand like what type of security, what level of security we need, and then your different options. So for step number 7, assuming you've done step 1 through 6, you need to pick a programming language and stick with it. This is all focused on backend development. So the languages that I always like to tell people to look at first: Python, JavaScript, and Java. Java is great for if you want to work at enterprises. Think of like insurance and banks, where you know they have great company culture, bonuses, like team builders, or things like going out to go-kart racing. Like usually larger organizations kind of have a certain culture, and they usually have Java as their language of choice. If you want to work maybe more mid-sized startup, JavaScript is usually the go-to, and that's simply because smaller teams, they want people to be able to write front end and back end, and you can do that with Java, which makes it so unique. Some people really love to push new developers JavaScript simply due to the fact that they can build APIs, they can leverage frameworks like Express, they can build a full application all in JavaScript. But in Python, you need to use some frameworks. But I guess what I'm trying to say is JavaScript is definitely something where you can do front end and back end. However, Java seems to be very popular at enterprises. JavaScript seems to be very popular at mid-sized startup. Python is just popular. I cannot tell you, like, if you want to work at a FANG company, they love having the interview questions in Python. Python to me is like the lightsaber, whereas in Java might be like the samurai sword. They both cut and they both do damage, but one in some eyes is just a better weapon. Congratulations, you finally reached it toward the end of this episode, so I can finally divulge the most important step, which is learn by doing. You need to build meaningful projects. And like we said earlier, the very first project I suggest is your portfolio site. But because this is the zero to hero backend roadmap, the next project I highly suggest you building is an API. Now, depending on the language you picked, what I would do is simply Google how to build an API in JavaScript, how to build an API in Java. There's a lot of great stuff out there, but I'll link some of my favorite in the show notes below. And by no means am I sponsored by any of these people. These are honestly some great content creators out there who there's no need to reinvent the wheel. So I'd rather just share the information with you guys. Once you have your API built, the next essential step for you to be a backend developer is connecting it to a database, which means you need to understand the difference between NoSQL and SQL. So you use Postgres, MongoDB, Microsoft SQL Server, because when you're working with an API, think of it like this. The UI, the front end, is going to send a request. Hey, backend, can you give me Caleb King's information? And the API is going to be like, let me do some magic. Let me do some thinking. Let me go to the database. Let me see if I have it. And then it's going to give it all back to the front end. So understanding the entire process, that flow, is going to be really essential for you to be a software developer and getting started. And the best way to do it is building the individual pieces. The front end piece, which is the portfolio, the API piece, which is in the middle, and the database piece, which is at the very end. So I hope this episode helped you. I hope it gave you a little bit more clarity on how to go about learning software development without going to a boot camp, without dropping $10,000. So if you enjoyed this content that you're seeing here, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. But for now, that's all we got for you. I'm out. Peace.